me sat down next to her computer.
It's only this much,
Sorry.
but I didn't want to put it on the altar. I didn't want to put it on.
Well, then put it on the table.
So I guess I'll just walk.
We'll put it on the table. You can leave it in front of you.
Okay, so where do we want to start with this, all of this? I watched the Symbolon videos, and I know you guys can have a bazillion questions. And so, Tristan's not here. Well, the guy who had the billion questions is not. That means you guys got to pick up the slack, right? And I'm sure you must have questions. This stuff can be. What I found myself with the Symbolon videos, they deal with it at a kind of a very high level, which is good because you don't get in the weeds when you're at the high level. You're at the theoretical level. It really comes down where the rubber meets the road, and it's when you apply it in your own life, and that's where we come to these discernment issues, and they can be very difficult. I mean, the things that are going on in our country now are very difficult. With illegal immigration, with drugs, and with our, the crime stuff that's going on, and how we treat, prisoners, those who are accused. We get down to really specific instances, and we can argue all day about, whether something is right or wrong, or something is just or not just, and so that becomes pretty tricky. So I would say that given the 7 categories, I guess we could start off and say, is there something that in particular that you would like to clarify? And also, I guess we should do the caveat. I am not an expert, okay? You would just assume all clergy is, and I wrestle with these things just like you do. Maybe even more so because of my position and what I do in the parish, and so I pay particular attention to the things like the things that the Pope says, and the things that our bishop says, and the things that are going on in our diocese, in our parish, in our state. And so it's not easy. It's not easy at all. And there's a good chance you may not agree with me. There's a good chance I may not agree with you. What I would do is, generally speaking, and I do this with the kids because I teach, right now I teach middle school, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, Old Testament, New Testament, church history, which is a lot easier because there's no ambiguity, very little ambiguity there, right? But what I usually preface when I tell them something, especially I say, the church teaches this. It's not Ted teaches it. It's not my opinion. It's not my favorite author or my favorite priest and not the priest I don't like. The church teaches this, okay? And then from there we can move on and say, well, what does that mean for us in our situation, in our lives, okay? So this is, we got to start somewhere, so I don't know where we're going to start. So some of you guys watched the Symbolon video. There was 2 of them, right? 9 and 10? Catholic moral teaching? Yes.
I think it's just one.
Yeah, I thought it
It's just one video.
I watched 9 and 10. I saw that they were broken into 2.
Oh,
I don't think it was that.
well then you saw more than we did.
Okay, or maybe I watched the wrong thing. All right, open up questions, topic. It doesn't even really have to be a question to say, can you clarify this, or what are your thoughts on this, or what does the church teach in something that was not clear or anything like that? Just so we can once we get started, usually once you get me started, I roll down the hill like a giant snowball, so. But it's hard to get that big snowball moving, Okay, questions, comments?
I'll just make a comment.
Okay.
One of the things they talked about was being tolerant, and I like how they said to be tolerant, you have to first disagree. It kind of goes with what you were just saying about, whether you believe, like how you're going to explain this stuff. You know what I mean?
Right, and one of the keys in disagreeing in general, especially if you're a Christian, is you have to give proper respect to people, even if you don't agree with them.
Charity.
And you also have to have charity, thinking that they don't disagree with you because they're in league with the devil. You know what I mean? It's like they come from a different place. Everybody has their own experiences and the things that they've learned, and they bring that to the table when they make a decision. And so you have to have the charity to basically give them and say, okay, I think you're coming to this problem in good faith. And of course, I always come to the table with good faith, because that's the way we think. And but at least having that awareness, right, that maybe that you're not truly adversaries, but that you're trying to figure things out together. And a lot of times, if I have really deep conversations with someone who I disagree with on some particular topic, many times, even if I hold my position, it does cause me to kind of question some of the assumptions that help me come to my position on the issue. And that happens a lot, or it has happened a lot in my life, particularly with the church. When I was 21, I was absolutely sure that the church was wrong on this whole slew of 50 issues, right? They're wrong on this, they're wrong on that, they're wrong on that, because of course I know better, right? 2,000 years of the smartest people in history, St. Thomas Aquinas, Augustine, what do they know? Hey, I'm 21, I know everything. And then as I grew older and had more experiences, I began to see a pattern emerging. And the pattern was, okay, church turned out to be right about that. Ted 0, church 1, okay? And then over time, it became, I really didn't score any points, but the church was right, it turned out to be, on a lot of issues, because I didn't have full understanding. And of course, years of experience will do that to you, And I have changed my position on many things. And it seems like, if I look at my track record, I'd say, church was right every single time, Ted was right 0 times. So now, when I look at these contentious issues that I disagree with, I may disagree with, for example, maybe something that the Pope might have said. And so, instead of rushing in and say, he's wrong, I always have the kind of self-awareness to step back and say, okay, every single time in my list of disagreements with the church, I was always wrong. So what are my odds that I'm right this time? So it gives you a little bit of humility and causes you to think a little bit more. And again, looking at that point of, okay, what is his point of view? What is he trying to say? And sometimes I think there are translation issues, especially when the media translates what he says, because they have an agenda and they have a viewpoint and they want to push it and they want to tilt. And any movement that they can move in something that he says, they do it. So you have to be, first of all, you have to be distrustful of the translation and of the popular awareness of what's happening, because he has a tendency to kind of stumble on things and they take full advantage of it.
I was going to recommend that if you want to know the official, what the church is really doing, what's really going on, your best bet is to watch the news on EWTN. They will report it accurately from the church, without any rumors or without any, you go to a Catholic source, the National Catholic Register is a good newspaper. You go to the church to find out what's behind what the Pope's letter says. Go to the church to find out what did he really say when he was off the cuff on that airplane and being interviewed by reporters. What did he actually say? What was the context that it was in? And I never watch secular news sources to make any determination about what the church is teaching. I don't never take their word for anything when it comes, especially when it comes to the church teachings. It's just not smart to do it because they do have their agenda. And EWTN has a night news program. I think it's on at 9 o'clock, and they will cover anything that's important. And then on Sirius Satellite Radio, they also have different programs there that are available that you can listen to if you want to know what the church is teaching on something. There's Catholic sources that you can go to to find out what the church teaches, not secular sources, because they're not always going to be accurate.
I found, and I've done a lot of thinking about, what I was going to say tonight, which was terrifying because, like I said, with moral teaching, once you drill down to actual concrete examples, you can get stuck in the weeds very quickly. What I found, I think, in just as a general approach, and I noticed that too with the Symbolon. Symbolon kept it very high level, theoretical. They didn't give a lot of examples, and although I think I may have watched the wrong ones. It was a two-part. It was chapter 9, chapter 10. Both of them were Catholic moral teaching.
No, it was part 2, session 6.
Yeah.
And I went on forum. Those are the ones I typed in Catholic moral teaching. Those are the two that came up.
No,
So,
this is more about, did it start out talking about Mother Teresa in Calcutta?
the second one did, yeah.
Okay, that's
That
the
was
one.
the one.
That was the one that was this week.
That was listed as chapter 10, I think it was. But yes, what I think, what I've come to think about is that we look at these general, there's 7 categories, right? 7 categories, Catholic moral teaching, and we look at these. We look at these from the
That
top.
wasn't in the video.
No, that wasn't in the.
That wasn't in
It wasn't in the video, but that's what Catholic
Okay.
social teaching has 7 aspects.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay, like respect for life, solidarity,
Oh.
right? Those kind of things, dignity of work, so we look at these issues and we say we have these guidelines that are at the top, but we always have to use discernment when we drill down into concrete cases, because I mean, just as a quick example, we are called to take care of one another, called to love one another. Okay, so I love someone, my child, my cousin, my best friend, son, whatever it is, and they need something from me. And of course, out of charity, I would give them something. Let's say it's money for something some problem that they have. And that's a good thing. And I sacrifice to say I give this to them as a free gift. And if I don't get paid back, then that's I accept that. But you also, on the other hand, have to worry about enabling them to do something, either preventing them from doing something that they should do on their own, or, for example, in the cases of addiction, right? You don't want to feed into that and enable them to continue to do the wrong thing. So there is a balance that is going to require discernment, right? That's what we hear sometimes is the tough love, and this is one example. And I think that if we talk about all 7 of those categories, those issues come up every single time. So we're not, God gave us a brain, He gave us discernment, and we need to use that when we interact with one another. However, the precepts are what's important, right? We need to show charity. We need to be patient. We need to be kind. We need to show respect to people, right? We need to assume that they have good motives and not assume that they are out to get us or out to cheat us, or take something from us. We all, even just, what's going on now with, people from other countries coming across the border illegally and coming into the country. And we say, well, we have a responsibility as Christians to treat them with human dignity because they are our brothers and sisters. Okay? But, on the other hand, they're also breaking the law. Okay? They're also straining social services. And actually, even the way that things are set up now, they're being pulled because everybody wants to come here because they can receive things for free and they can strive for a better life, whereas perhaps they would be better off trying to make their society that they live in better instead of giving up and leaving. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of different angles that you can take on this. But overall, we cannot treat them like animals. We can't treat them like criminals. We have to treat them with respect. Okay, unfortunately, there's a lot of people in those groups that are coming in that are gang members, hardened criminals, people with severe mental problems, and we are allowing those people to come into our society and disrupt it. You know, and so there's many different facets of this. And of course, once you sit down and once you get to, again, specific cases, now you have to basically use discernment and say, you know, what is the best approach to this? The other thing, from a high level, as, you know, kind of like a guideline for approach is that one thing I learned over the years, the government cannot love you. People can love you, your church can love you, your family can love you. The government can never love you. And we see a lot of times that the government does things that is counterproductive to social values, to community adhesion, because they're groups of people and they make mistakes. And a lot of times some people in that government have agendas that are not public, that they're just trying to work on below the radar so that their agendas are not known. And so we see a lot of those things. So one thing is like, personally, I never trust the government. I've learned over the years. And but on the other hand, we have a lot of people that I know, who do trust the government implicitly. And I found this is one of the awkward parts of being in Ireland, because in the EU, you know, as much as we see, let's say, as much as Americans tend to distrust the government, when I went to Ireland, I found there was very little to no distrust of the government. And it was always like, well, the government's going to make things better. That's what they always do. I'm like, what are you talking about? You know? A quick example, we arrived in 2018. They were just finishing a huge project. They were building a brand new hospital in Dublin. And in the beginning, when they were pitching this to the government, they were saying, well, it's going to cost $5 billion, $5.5 billion. So they went ahead and they approved it. We got there in 2018. The cost was already, I think it was $9.8 billion. And everybody was all up in arms because they had just released another, they hadn't finished yet. Excuse me. And they had just released another request for money. And it ended up, well, we were there through May of 21 before we escaped. I mean, we came home. And because they were shut down for 2 solid years. There was nothing open for 2 years. We got tired of that, and after 18 months, we came home. Because we came back for Christmas, and there were restaurants open, and people, I was like, wow, this is really different. We had to go back to prison. And I said, if I'm going to be stuck in my own house, and I'm going to be stuck in my house, I'd be stuck in my own house, in my own country, with my own kids and my own dogs. You know? And so we came home. But when we were leaving, the final bill on that hospital ended up to be something like $26 billion. So if you look at it, you know, they said, oh, it's going to cost $5, but it cost a lot more. And the interesting thing was observing how the Irish people kind of processed that. And they were outraged, but they couldn't understand, well, what happened? Where did all the money go? And I'm like, what do you mean where did the money go? It got stolen and fraud. Just everybody's got their money, you know, accounting problems. It's a government project. What do you expect? You know? Exactly. And they're like, oh, you Americans are very cynical. I'm like, well, we have
experience.
We have a healthy skepticism, right? We have a healthy skepticism.
We won that war.
Yeah, we got away from it. So the EU, unfortunately, I mean, the EU was a good idea because it reduced, you know, the chance of war between, you know, they had been fighting for centuries, and but there's also a lot of, they gave up a lot of their freedoms, their individual freedoms as countries, and now it's basically one big block, and they have to obey laws by people that they didn't vote for, that don't represent them, and that's a problem. So as many as the problems we have over here, I think it's a lot worse over there. You know, one of the reasons why England got out. My point in all this is, you cannot implement, might be a good word. You cannot implement your moral actions by going through the government, right? You can't say, well, I voted for this, so therefore I'm done. Wash my hands, walk away. That's not what Jesus is calling us to do. Everything that we do as a Christian is one-on-one. We show the love for the people, and he even mentioned it several times in the Symbolon. We're called to love one another, but we're supposed to start right where we are. We start with the people closest to us, and we work out, right? Because we only have so much power, I guess you would say, right? We have so much money, we have so much time, and we have to choose how to spend it. Okay, so if I go home and I spend 5 hours on the Xbox playing some game and I ignore my children, well, obviously that's one, not just. It's a poor use of time, right? It's selfish. I can tick them all off. So at each point, I have to decide how much I give of myself to my wife, my children, my family, my parish, my school, the teenagers in the youth group, my pastor. I have to divide myself up into pieces. And I'm called to try to do give as much of myself as I can. I'm supposed to be selfless, especially because I'm clergy now. I don't get to be a selfish bastard. But so I'm trying to grow out of that. But I think we're all on the same path, and we're all called to deal with one another, right? And I know a lot of people too. You see people all the time. They're so nice and friendly and caring when they're doing things like, we're sending boxes to people overseas so they can be self-sufficient, and we're sending all of these boxes of joy to kids in third world countries to tell them about Jesus, and then they're nasty to the people who they live around and the people who come in contact with them all the time. And it's flipped around. It's supposed to be the other way around. You're supposed to start by loving those around you and expanding out into the circle, right? It's your family, your community. That's where we start, because that's where we have the most power. So those are the two approaches I take when I look at Catholic moral teaching. Is I ask yourself, what am I called to do in this situation? I don't know if that answered any of your questions. I forgot what the question was. But it was a good starting point, I think.
I have one thing. Growing up, I always was told there's the truth. And as an adult, and the more and more older I've gotten, I've realized that there's your truth and their truth and his truth, and that's all. That's been a real problem with me, because it's just like there's the truth.
That's
and
right. And
I liked how they talked about that.
The first thing that comes to mind when you said that was something that's always now, mostly recently, probably from my life, probably in the last 10 years or so, is the truth is not a thing, it's a person. And the truth is Jesus Christ. He is the truth. And I think in our current society, but I'm sure this happened all through society, but there's this tendency towards moral relativism, right? And unfortunately, what I see in our society, especially as I grow older, I see this more and more, but it's about me and how it affects me, right? The phone turns out to be a me device. It's all about me, my Facebook page, my social media, and it's all about how I look to other people. It's a mirror. It's all inwardly directed, whereas I think we're called to be outwardly directed. We're supposed to be concerned and show love and care for other people. And of course, there's all these competing factions that are trying to tell you what their truth is. But when we look at, there is objective truth. It's not my truth or your truth. There's the truth. We might have a viewpoint on what it is from our standpoint. One thing that comes to mind, this might be a bad example, might get us further into the weeds. A long, long time ago, I was probably, 25, back when I thought I knew everything. And I don't know if you remember, there was an incident that was the Ruby Ridge, where the FBI shot that family, the woman in the doorway and the nightmare. And I remember at the time being kind of outraged at what the FBI did, and I still am in many ways. But I also worked with a guy. His name was Jim Self, and he was a Jew. He was a practicing Jew, and we're friends, we used to talk all the time. And it came up in conversation, and of course I was trying to talk about, the rights, how unfair it was, and then he said something to me that really kind of made me think and stuck with me. And he said, of all the theoretical things about governments and rights and private property and all this other stuff, and he said, I have a real hard time having sympathy for this guy who wants to kill my family. Because for him it was personal.
Yeah.
And that really made me stop and kind of think about things. Now you could say, well, I had my truth and he had his truth. And he put a dent in my truth when he said that, right? Because it made me understand that a lot of these things, at the theoretical level, you can have these arguments, but it really comes down to how they are implemented, or how you implement them in your life. That comes down to what the truth is. And that's why we have to cling to Jesus, because he is the truth.
And I think that's a misuse of the word truth, because the more proper thing I think would be to say, it's my perspective
Yes.
and your perspective of this issue.
Right.
Because truth is objective. In other words, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. That's an objective truth. If you don't like it, I'm sorry.
Go
You
live on
can't
another
change
planet.
it. You can't change that. And God's laws are objective truths. If God says, thou shalt not murder, that's what he means. And that's an objective truth. Murder is always wrong. Always. It's always a sin, it's always wrong, because it's a commandment, and because God can't be wrong.
And it's interesting because the translation in Hebrew is "thou shalt not murder."
Yes,
it's
it
not,
is.
It's not "thou shalt not kill."
Right, that's why I said murder.
Right, and I'm glad you used that word, and it is true, and because self-defense is not murder.
Right, that's right.
And as a father, for example, I am responsible for the safety of my wife and children. Okay, if I had, I guess, the way I used to think about things. Okay, so I would say, if I want to go into a situation that can be dangerous, I could be killed or I could be seriously injured or hurt, and I take that on, so I'm going to be a saint and I want to go and do something like that, then that's okay, because it's me making that decision. But I'm not going to let my wife or children get hurt, okay? Because my duty as a father is to protect them. But then I started thinking about it a little more deeply and saying, well, again, when I was talking about everybody who gets a slice of my time, right? I would be irresponsible not defending my life because my wife depends on me, my children depend on me, my parish depends on me, in a certain sense of diocese. But my pastor, the people that I minister to, the children that I teach, the high school students in the youth group. So it's not fair for me to place myself in jeopardy because I owe them that. So maybe I don't have the right just because it's my life to go and do that. But a lot of times there's a lot more thinking, I think, that needs to go on. But at one time I had a conversation with a woman who, she was given a talk like this, and it was kind of on the same topic, but her daughter went to New York City and was going to school there. And she found out that she was staying at the library till very late at night, and then walking home through the city streets to go back to where she was living. At the time, very dangerous, a lot of dangerous area. And she was telling stories about how they went to visit and they couldn't believe there was people doing drugs in the street, passed out with needles. There's drug deals going on. There's violence. People were getting robbed, and their daughter going home every day, just walking through these discreet streets. And I'm thinking about this, and I'm like, this is horrible. And she said, well, they went to a little coffee shop, and the people in there were talking, and they said, oh, whatever her name was, Beverly or whatever. So she says, oh yeah, we know Beverly. Says, and the people that were there, they're like, we watch out for her. So okay, and but as a father, I would say, I don't want her risking her life doing that, And so we had some interesting conversation after that. I didn't kind of get what she was getting at when she was talking about it, but it comes down kind of like what I was just talking about. There's some discernment that needs to take place, I don't know if that answers your question at all. I don't know if there is an answer to that
Yeah, I
question.
just thought it was very interesting, this.
Yeah, got to be very careful with moral relativism, because a lot of times people will try to bend you out of your
It's
viewpoint.
basically selfish. Moral relativism is basically selfish.
Right. It's like whatever's
It's
good
whatever's
for me
good
at the
for
time.
me.
Right, at the time.
Whatever's good for me.
Yeah. And we see that just as at a topical level with abortion, right?
Yes.
And a lot of women will say, I would love to have this baby, but I can't afford it. Or with even younger people that don't even have the choice. If I have this baby, my parents are kicking me out of the house. I'm 16 years old. Where am I going to go? How am I going to work? How am I going to have food? How am I going to have family? So with all the talk about choice, she has no choice. And I know we can go down into the weeds. But so it's like, well, it's good for me. It's not good for the child, obviously. And it destroys part of a woman's soul, I think, to do that.
Yes.
The women that I have met that have had
Yes.
abortions, they're quite damaged.
Yes.
It's not something that you recover from easily.
I've
I don't think you ever recover from it.
I've worked in Respect Life for 30 years. And a lot of the women who do work in Respect Life are women who've had abortions. And I know from personal experience a woman who, she died when she was 92, and just before she died, she was still talking about that abortion that she'd had when she was 20. It is not something that ever leaves you.
It's like the death of a child, your own child,
It is.
Right? You never recover from that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And deep down inside, no matter what the media tells you, no matter what, rhetoric that you hear, a woman knows.
Yeah.
If you talk to anybody that works at a crisis hotline or one of those places where you can call and find, they will tell you that when a woman is calling because she can't deal with abortion, what she will say to you is, I killed my child. Somewhere in that initial conversation, there's no fancy rhetoric, there's no sugarcoating it.
Only the truth.
They know exactly what they've done. I killed my child. And that would have to be something, I haven't experienced it, but I can tell from the other women that I have worked with, it's a horrible thing to live with. And this one woman, 92 years old, and it was there. She was still dealing with that. And she'd been to confession and, it's there. It never goes away.
Yeah, and we have in South Carolina, we have Rachel's Vineyard, which is
Yes,
deals with not only women who've had abortions,
but men.
men whose girlfriends or wives have had
Yeah.
abortions. And it worked. And then we also have the Palmetto Pregnancy Center down in Rock Hill that does ultrasounds and tries to make sure that women have the resources that they
Right.
need.
We have a pregnancy center here in Gaffney, and we also have St. Clair's Home
Right.
in Greenville that will take women in.
Yeah.
The problem is, we don't have enough of those facilities.
Right, and we also have Miravia, which is in Charlotte, which is at, right now they have a house at Belmont Abbey College.
Oh, good.
Where pregnant the students can come, it's an in-house facility, I think they have about 14 rooms, and they have a common kitchen area and stuff like that. What they do is, and there's two sisters, there's two nuns that are there, and then a lot of support personnel. But they're able to continue to go to class, and they have, they watch each other's children, and they teach them mothering skills. They get car seats and diapers, and, so that they can continue their education, so they don't feel that they have to force to choose between their education or the baby. It's called Miravia, Miraculous Way. It's in Latin. They always have a big fundraiser dinner at the convention center. Before I went to Ireland, I used to go every year, and they always had good pro-life speakers. But last year, Jesus came. Jim Caviezel came. He was the speaker.
Oh, wow.
It was sold out in about 3 minutes. You couldn't get any tickets because everybody wanted to come see Jesus. And it was right at the time because the movie had just come out, Sound of Freedom.
Yeah.
So I wanted to go, but I couldn't get tickets.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of work, and I think as Catholics, as Christians, we're called to support those efforts.
Right.
Yeah, there's
Right.
also preborn.
Yeah, preborn is another one.
Ultrasounds.
Yeah.
And of course, if you are in the Knights of Columbus,
Yes.
like I'm in the Knights of Columbus, we
Yeah.
do a lot of pro-life activities. Before I went to Ireland, our parish always went to the March for Life in Washington, D.C. I've been probably 8 times. We used to always go to the march at the State House in Columbia. And so, I mean, and all that stuff is very important.
So you look at how crazy the times are now because, I mean, Father Chris Alar that I listen to a lot, he'll often talk about, that he really feels like he's gonna probably end up in prison, for his big mouth, before, the way our country is going and everything.
Oh, yeah, you can see it.
Being persecuted for Christ. And then when you see in the news, people just sitting on the sidewalk singing hymns outside an abortion clinic, and they're being sentenced to 11 years in prison for that in America.
And the illegal immigrants that beat the cops up in New York were in and out of the system very quickly. Nothing will happen to them.
We have a lot of social problems right now.
A lot.
We really do.
Yeah.
And you want to think about how much the world has changed. When I think I was probably like 16 or 17, and I remember reading some report, because I used to read Time magazine back there, and there was a thing on there that was saying that we predicted in the future they're actually going to sell water. People are going to buy water.
Yeah.
And I'm like, who's going to buy water? That's ridiculous. Why would you ever buy water? Look at
Yeah.
we're living in. I mean, that's just one tiny, stupid example. But I
Right.
mean, yes. So it's hard. Again, another reason we have to cling to Jesus.
Yes.
We have to cling to the truth.
Yeah.
Because He is the truth.
And you have to take your belief in Jesus and what the church teaches with you when you go to vote.
You do.
Right. Because it's also part of being in. Because we are also called to be good citizens. If we go back and see one of my favorite prophet, Jeremiah, the Israelites were in captivity. They were in exile. Jerusalem, the temple had been destroyed, and they took all of the smart people and the royalty and the doctors and the lawyers and the Indian chiefs, and they carted them all off to Babylon and said, "You're going to work here and serve us." And they left all the sick, lame, and lazy back in Jerusalem, where they just wallowed in their own filth and did nothing. And the people were just moaning and lamenting, "Why are you leaving us in captivity?" But Jeremiah, God spoke to Jeremiah and came and said, "You need basically to bloom where you're planted. You need to be prosperous and make the city that you're in prosperous, because then you will prosper also." Right? And that's one of those reasons I always thought I could be so holy if I didn't have this family. These are the most, not my particular family, but my mother, my sisters, my aunts and uncles, right? He puts me in this. It's infuriating. How can I be holy in this family? These people are awful, right? If only I had a better family, I could be really holy. And sometimes I feel that way about my parish. I'm like, oh, these people. But again, you're called to bloom where you're planted. God put me there for a specific reason. I don't know what it is. Okay, I don't even, never wanted to be a deacon. Don't know why he wants me to be a deacon, but that's his decision. But it's very difficult. There's things I got to do I don't want to do. Things I would never want to do. But again, God's calling all of us to bloom where we're planted because he put us here for some reason. And I remember there was a very wise deacon, turned out to be was a deacon, many, many years ago. We used to do youth group. We used to go to homeworks and we would repair houses and build, fix roofs and windows and stuff for elderly people that own their own house that couldn't afford repairs. And we'd take 100 teenagers and we'd go into 10 houses and we'd put roofs on and do all this work. And working with teenagers is not easy, okay? But I mean, the deacon that was running the program, he said one time, he was talking and he said, God puts us in, we come into and out of each other's lives, right? I came into your life for a short amount of time, and then you probably will never see me, right? So God puts us into and out of each other's lives for a reason, for a season, or a lifetime. And sometimes you don't know which it is, okay? And I noticed that every single time I went to homeworks, it's a week in the hot sun in Fayetteville in late June, and it's always like 100 degrees, and you've got these infuriating teenagers that you're working with. And half the time I go there with a bad attitude. I'm like, oh, I gotta do this again. But something always happens where I think I needed to learn something from somebody. And I'm sure somebody needed to learn something from me. So he puts us together for a reason, okay? And I kept coming back every single time. Every time it ended, I said, I'm never doing this again. And the next year I'd be back there again. I've done it 13 years in a row. And so, in a sense, that's a season because it's a lot of the same cadre of leaders. And I see these people, I have a relationship with them that lasts 1 week every year, right? So he puts us in each other's lives for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. Sometimes, things work out where somebody asks me to be a godparent, and I become part of their family, and then they become lifelong friends. So anyway, just put that thought in there because it's always been with me. God puts us in each other's lives for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. I don't know what that has to do with moral teaching. But anything else that's burning? Curiosity? Anything that's not on the table? Do all dogs go to heaven? Nothing? Okay.
Ready to Kahoot it?
Gonna Kahoot it.
While we're waiting for everybody to join, last week I was talking about that there was a homily that Father Mike did that was really good on decision making, and I told you I would tell you what it was. So if you go on YouTube and search Mike Schmidt's homily, it's called Claimed and Called. It's really good. Got the 4 doors. It's really good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, and the last thing, the 18th and the 24th, sponsors and godparents, if they're able to attend. Now, if they live far, far away to where, it's a burden for them to come, or if they're scheduled to work that day and they can't make it, that's fine. But if they can, that would be wonderful. All right, everybody in? Yep. Starting. 3, 2, 1. Quiz. Multi-select. How do you become the hero of the story of your life? Select all that are true. By getting all you can out of life, by being patient with others, by being generous with others, by serving God and others.
So many things wrong with this.
All right. All of them except for the red. So by being patient with others, by being generous with others, and serving God and others. The subject of the goal of your life shouldn't be getting all you can. That's being selfish. And Tristan's not here, so we're going to have a new number 1. So we've got Steve, Brad, Isabella, and Ella. Quiz. It is not sufficient that we value something and choose it. We must also have this, or our choices won't be possible. Strong will, mentors, skills or virtues, happy demeanor. And the correct answer is skills or virtue. You have to have the skills or the virtue to do something to be able to succeed at it. A strong will won't get you there, mentors won't get you there, and a happy demeanor, while it might make it more pleasant, it won't get you there. Okay. Steve, Ella, Alyssa, Brad, Isabella. Multi-select. What is a virtue? Select all that are true. A habit or skill that helps us lead a moral life. Something that comes natural without any work. Can be positive or negative. Something that needs to be developed. And this one is Christmas colors, red and green were the 2 correct ones. A habit or skill that helps us lead a moral life, and something that needs to be developed. They do require work, and they don't necessarily come natural, and virtues are always positive. So that's why the other 2 were not right. Steve, Ella, John, Alyssa, Brad. John moved in. Quiz. What makes a choice morally good? Good intention, good action, regardless of circumstances. Good circumstances, good intention, and good act. A good act regardless of intention or circumstances, or none of the above. And the blue is the correct. You have to have a good circumstance, good intention, and a good action for it to be a morally good choice. That's straight from the video. Well, all of these are pretty much straight from the video. John is now our leader. No pressure, John. No pressure, no pressure. Steve, Ella, Brad, listen. Quiz. What 3 things must be present in a mortal sin? Grave matter, full knowledge that it is a sin, and freely consent to do it. Grave matter that you choose to do. Full knowledge something is a sin and you choose to do it anyway. Any serious sin. And the red is the correct. Grave matter, full knowledge that it's a sin, and freely consent to do it. So 6 of you got that one right. Let's see what that did to the standings. John's hanging on. John, Steve, Brad, Alyssa, Ella. Multi-select. How can a distorted conscience be reformed and strengthened? Select all that are true. Through the scriptures, through sacred tradition, through the law, through the teachings of the church. All of them except through the law. The law is what the world tells us to do, but sacred scripture, sacred tradition, the teaching of the church. will all help you reform, and strengthen your conscience. John's still there. John, Brad, Ella, Alyssa, Steve. And Mariana is the highest climber. True or false? A mortal sin loosens our friendship with God. And that is false. For the 4 of you that got it right, why is it false? Because a mortal sin breaks our friendship with God. It doesn't loosen it, it breaks it. Okay, see what that did? John, Ella, Brad, Alyssa, Steve. John is hanging on. He might be in the chocolate, big time. Quiz, multi-select. Moral relativism. Select all that are true. Teaches that there is no actual right or wrong. What is right for you may not be right for me. Makes you the author of your own morality and develops a good conscience in someone. All of them except the green. Okay? So it does teach that there's no actual right or wrong. Everything is just relative. What is right for you may not be right for me, and makes you the author of your own morality, all of which is actually wrong. That's why moral relativism is wrong. But it definitely does not develop a good conscience in someone. So let's see what that did. John, Brad, Ella, Alyssa, and Steve. John has a streak with 7 correct answers in a row. True or false? Even if one of the circumstances, your intention or your action is bad, they are all bad. Even even one of the circumstances, your intention or your action is bad, they are all bad. True or false? It is true. 7 of you got that one right. And nobody moved. Quiz, multi-select. Your conscience can select all that are true. Recognize good and bad. Decide for itself what is good. Be formed and strengthened, or be distorted. All of them except for the blue, which most everybody got. John, Brad, Ella, Alyssa, and Mariana. True or false? Venial sins hinder our friendship with God and may be confessed during the penitential rite at Mass. True or false? Venial sins. And it is true, which most of you got right. Did it mess anything up? Oh, we got podium time. 3rd place goes to Ella. 2nd place goes to Brad. 1st place goes to John. Good job. We got a new king at the podium. You get 2. And you get to be our new diabetic. You get 3.
How exciting.
All right, guys, pass those around. Anybody have anything else for us? Everybody's clear on the upcoming events? Everybody knows not to be here next Tuesday, unless you want to come for Fat Tuesday and eat pancakes?
It's a fun time, y'all go.
Yeah. Yep, pancakes.
Okay, good. Any final questions or comments? Do all dogs go to heaven? Nothing at all, really?
If the dog makes you happy and it's part of your life, why wouldn't God make you happy?
No, God gave us dogs, so he shows us an example of unconditional love. He's put many examples of things in the world that we can see, and that's one.
It's so hard, because my dog is so naughty. She chews and chews.
I feel your pain. I just adopted a pit bull terrier mix from Gastonia Law Enforcement, and he's 15 months old. And his name is Bruno the Destroyer, and he destroys everything. And he destroys all my wife's.
I have to do with my grandson, so I wake up in the morning, it's like, oh, somebody let the dog out and he's not in, and you chew all the kids' toys, and the kids are crying, and I'm like, you stupid dog! And then here's my grandson, you stupid dog! Oh, no, I
For the ones that miss these sessions, if you haven't seen the videos yet, please watch the videos that you missed. And I'll have quizzes for you guys to complete, just to show that you really did watch the videos that you did come to class. You may. Yes,
So-
if anybody'd like to take a picture of it so you know which ones that you need to watch yet. Oh, that'd be great. She's just here because she loves us.
I've already been through the class. Do y'all want this?
Take a picture of that.
You want anybody to take a picture?
So all the deacons in the diocese met this weekend. So Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday was the deacons' convocation, and we had a speaker from the Augustinian Institute. And really highly recommend. There's on forms. There's some from the institutes and on the Real Presence.
Yeah.
And we had 4 one-hour talks. Absolutely fantastic. They should have recorded it so they could show it to parishioners. Because I still have parishioners all the time that come to me and say, "We're in the 3rd year of Eucharistic revival. We're not doing anything," you know. And so, and I had a lot of complaints. But so having access to it, you guys have access to